Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're scrolling through YouTube at 3 in the morning looking for something to help you drift off to dreamland, you've stumbled upon the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes completely unhinged world of Family Guy with some truly wild facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you wide awake wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's explore the wonderfully weird universe of Quahog, Rhode Island. Trust me, by the end of this journey through Family Guy's most fascinating secrets, you'll either be peacefully snoozing or have a whole new appreciation for just how crazy this show really gets. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox thought they were done with the Griffin family forever. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The ratings were so incredible that Fox literally had to eat humble pie and bring the show back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007, only to reverse that decision just months later. Talk about a roller coaster relationship between a network and a show. Speaking of relationships, let's talk about the voice behind our favorite talking baby, Stewie Griffin. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice Stewie, he also voices Brian, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and several other characters. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane based Stewie's voice on the accent of English actor Rex Harrison, who you might know from the classic musical My Fair Lady. Yeah, that sophisticated, slightly pompous British accent that makes Stewie sound like an evil mastermind. It's straight from a Broadway legend. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he wanted Stewie to sound like an old-school English gentleman, which makes it even funnier when this supposedly refined character is plotting world domination from his crib. Now, if you think the show pushes boundaries on television, you should hear about some of the stuff that never made it to air. The writers and animators have created countless scenes, jokes, and entire storylines that were deemed too controversial even for Family Guy's standards. And considering what does make it onto television, that's really saying something. There's apparently an entire vault of unused content that could probably fill several seasons worth of episodes. Some of these rejected bits have made their way onto DVD releases as deleted scenes, but many remain locked away forever, too wild even for the show known for having no limits. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Unlike many animated series that plan out entire seasons in advance, Family Guy often operates more like a live-action sitcom. The writers frequently come up with ideas on the spot, and episodes are sometimes completely rewritten just weeks before they're supposed to air. This spontaneous approach explains why the show can feel so fresh and unpredictable, but it also leads to some pretty intense crunch times for the animation team. Imagine trying to animate complex scenes with just days to spare before broadcast. Let's dive into some character secrets that most fans never realize. Brian the dog, everyone's favorite intellectual canine, was originally supposed to be just a regular pet. In the original concept, Brian was going to be a typical dog who couldn't talk and would just bark and fetch like any normal household pet. Seth MacFarlane decided to make him a talking character at the last minute, and thank goodness he did, because Brian's philosophical conversations and sarcastic wit have become some of the show's most memorable moments. It's wild to think that one of the most complex characters almost didn't have a voice at all. The show's animation style has some fascinating secrets too. Those seemingly simple character designs actually take an enormous amount of work to create. Each character has hundreds of different facial expressions and poses that animators can mix and match. Stewie alone has over 300 different mouth positions just for speaking different sounds. The animators have to keep track of all these variations to maintain consistency across episodes. It's like having a massive digital puppet show where every single movement has to be carefully orchestrated. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's music even more. Seth MacFarlane isn't just the creator, writer, and voice actor for multiple characters. He's also a legitimate recording artist who's released several albums of traditional pop standards. His musical background heavily influences the show, which is why you'll notice that Family Guy has more musical numbers than most animated comedies. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just thrown in for laughs. They're crafted by someone who genuinely understands musical theater and classic American songbook traditions. The show's cultural impact goes way beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has actually influenced real-world events and conversations. Politicians have referenced the show in speeches. Academics have written scholarly papers about its social commentary, and it's been credited with introducing younger audiences to cultural references they might never have encountered otherwise. Think about how many classic movies, TV shows, songs, and historical events you first learned about through a Family Guy cutaway gag. The show serves as this weird cultural bridge between different generations of entertainment. Now let's talk about some of the show's most controversial episodes and why they're so memorable. The writers have never shied away from tackling sensitive subjects, and sometimes their approach has sparked genuine debates about comedy, censorship, and social responsibility. Some episodes have been pulled from rotation, others have been edited for different markets, and a few have become legendary among fans, specifically because they push things too far. This willingness to court controversy has kept Family Guy relevant for over 2 decades, even as television landscape has changed dramatically around it. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unlike anything you'd expect. Seth MacFarlane often records multiple characters in the same session, essentially having conversations with himself. He'll record Peter's lines, then immediately switch to Brian's voice to respond, then jump to Stewie for the next exchange. Watching him work in the recording booth is apparently like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder having a very organized conversation with themselves. Other voice actors have said it's both impressive and slightly unsettling to watch. Here's something that connects to the show's longevity. Family Guy has aired over 400 episodes, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. To put that in perspective, if you watched every single episode back-to-back, you'd be sitting there for more than 150 hours straight. That's almost a full week of continuous Family Guy content. The show has literally created enough material to entertain someone for an entire week without sleeping, eating, or taking a single break. The show's international versions reveal some fascinating cultural differences. Family Guy is broadcast in dozens of countries, and each version has to navigate different censorship standards and cultural sensitivities. In some countries, entire jokes are replaced with completely different content. In others, characters' names are changed, and certain running gags are modified to make sense to local audiences. There are versions of Family Guy where the cultural references are so different that they're essentially completely different shows with the same characters. Let's explore some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans never hear about. Like any long-running show, Family Guy has had its share of creative disagreements, contract disputes, and personality conflicts. Seth MacFarlane has been very public about his occasional frustrations with the show, even stepping back from day-to-day involvement for several seasons. There have been disputes over storylines, character development, and the general direction of the show. Some former writers and voice actors have shared stories about heated arguments in writers' rooms and recording sessions that had to be stopped because of creative differences. The show's merchandising empire is absolutely massive, but some of the most interesting products never made it to market. There have been proposed Family Guy video games, theme park attractions, and even a planned Broadway musical that would have featured the Griffin family in live-action musical theater. The legal and logistical challenges of adapting animated characters for different mediums have killed dozens of potential projects over the years. Imagine walking through a Family Guy theme park, or watching actors in Peter and Lois costumes singing on Broadway. Here's a production secret that reveals how much work goes into each episode. A single 22-minute episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial concept to final broadcast. The process involves dozens of writers, voice actors, animators, sound engineers, and editors. Every single frame is reviewed multiple times. Every joke is analyzed and often rewritten. And every visual gag is carefully planned and executed. What looks like simple animation on screen represents thousands of hours of collaborative creative work. The show's relationship with censorship has created some legendary stories. There are episodes that exist in multiple versions, with different levels of content depending on when and where they're broadcast. The uncensored DVD versions of some episodes contain jokes and scenes that have never been seen on television. Meanwhile, daytime reruns are edited so heavily that some episodes are barely recognizable. The writers have learned to create content in layers, knowing that different versions will need different levels of editing for different audiences. Family Guy's influence on internet culture deserves its own discussion. The show has generated countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. Certain episodes have become legendary specifically because of how they're shared and referenced online. The show's cutaway gag format translates perfectly to social media, where short, punchy jokes can be easily shared and remixed. Some Family Guy moments have become more famous as internet memes than they ever were as television content. The voice acting talent that has appeared on Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment. Celebrities often jump at the chance to appear on the show, sometimes playing themselves, sometimes voicing original characters. The guest star list includes everyone from major Hollywood actors to political figures to professional athletes. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others have appeared just once but created memorable moments that fans still talk about years later. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the seemingly random cutaway gags are actually carefully constructed references to specific movies, TV shows, or historical events. The writers spend considerable time researching these references to make sure they're accurate, even when they're being completely absurd. There are entire databases that catalog every cultural reference in every episode, and the depth of knowledge required to understand all the jokes is honestly staggering. The show's animation has evolved significantly over its run, but not always in ways you might expect. While the overall character designs have remained consistent, the background art, lighting effects, and scene composition have become much more sophisticated. Early episodes look almost primitive compared to recent ones, but the evolution has been so gradual that most viewers don't notice. Comparing the pilot episode to current episodes is like looking at completely different shows that happen to use the same characters. Family Guy's impact on other animated shows cannot be overstated. The success of Family Guy paved the way for countless other adult animated comedies, from American Dad to Rick and Morty to BoJack Horseman. The show proved that animated comedies could tackle adult themes and attract mature audiences, opening up an entire genre that barely existed before. Many current animators and writers cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their work and career choices. The show's approach to storytelling often breaks conventional narrative rules in fascinating ways. Episodes frequently abandon their main plots entirely for extended tangents. Characters regularly break the fourth wall to address the audience directly, and the show often parodies its own format and conventions. This meta approach to comedy requires a level of self-awareness that's rare in television, and it's part of what keeps longtime fans engaged, even after hundreds of episodes. As we wind down this journey through Family Guy's hidden world, it's worth reflecting on how a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island became such a cultural phenomenon. The show succeeds because it taps into something fundamentally human about finding humor in chaos, about laughing at things that probably shouldn't be funny, and about the strange comfort of familiar characters behaving in completely unpredictable ways. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or wide awake thinking about animated comedy theory, Family Guy continues to surprise, offend, entertain, and occasionally enlighten its audience after more than 20 years on the air. The show's ability to constantly reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity is perhaps the most impressive fact of all. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into trouble that's even weirder than anything we've discussed tonight. The chaos never really stops. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it so perfect for helping restless minds finally find peace. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the giant chicken nightmares bite. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, and suddenly you remember that time Peter Griffin literally married a cardboard cutout of himself. Welcome to the weird, wild world of Family Guy, where the most random facts are often the most fascinating ones. Tonight, we're diving deep into the strangest corners of Quahog with facts so bizarre they'll either help you drift off to sleep or keep you awake, wondering how the writers even came up with this stuff. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that the original concept for Family Guy was completely different from what we got? Seth MacFarlane initially pitched the show as a much darker comedy about a dysfunctional family dealing with serious issues. The network executives were so confused by the pilot that they almost didn't pick it up. Thank goodness they did, because otherwise, we wouldn't have gems like the time Brian became a used car salesman and accidentally sold Death his own car. Speaking of Brian, here's a fact that might surprise you. The character was originally supposed to be much more of a background character, basically just the family pet who occasionally made sarcastic comments. But Seth MacFarlane loved voicing him so much that Brian gradually became one of the main characters. This explains why Brian's personality seems to evolve so dramatically throughout the early seasons. He went from being a simple talking dog to a pretentious intellectual with daddy issues and a drinking problem. Now let's talk about something truly random. The chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't supposed to become a recurring gag. The first fight scene in the episode Da Boom was meant to be a one-off joke. But the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they kept bringing it back. Each subsequent chicken fight got more elaborate and destructive, eventually involving helicopters, submarines, and entire city blocks being demolished. The longest chicken fight lasted nearly 4 minutes of screen time, which is practically an eternity in television comedy. Here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every time you see the Griffin house, the layout is actually consistent throughout the series. The creators took the time to map out every room, every hallway, every closet in the house, so that when characters move around, it makes spatial sense. This is incredibly rare in animated comedies, where houses often have impossible layouts that change depending on what the joke requires. The Griffin House blueprints are actually available online, and fans have used them to build accurate replicas in video games and even real life. Moving on to character quirks. Did you know that Meg's unpopularity at school was originally supposed to be temporary? The writers planned to have her eventually find her place and become more confident, but the running gag of everyone treating Meg terribly became so popular with audiences that they decided to make it a permanent part of her character. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg, has said in interviews that she sometimes feels bad about all the abuse her character receives, but she understands that it's become essential to the show's dynamic. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that's perfect for late-night pondering. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters on the show, but he almost didn't voice Stewie at all. The original plan was to have Stewie voiced by a child actor, but MacFarlane was worried about the controversial things Stewie would say and didn't want to put a real child in that position. So he developed Stewie's distinctive British accent as a way to make the character's adult thoughts coming from a baby's mouth even more surreal and funny. Chris Griffin's voice is another interesting story. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has to actively make his voice higher and more nasal to sound, like a teenage boy. As Green has gotten older, it's become more challenging for him to hit those high notes, so the sound engineers often have to digitally adjust his voice in post-production. This is why Chris's voice sometimes sounds slightly different between episodes, depending on how much digital manipulation was required. Here's a fact that connects to real-world events in a weird way. The episode where Peter starts his own political party called the Tea Party Patriots was written and animated before the actual Tea Party movement became prominent in American politics. When the episode aired, many viewers thought it was a commentary on current events, but it was actually just an incredible coincidence. The writers had to add a disclaimer explaining that any similarity to real political movements was purely accidental. Now for something completely different. The Pawtucket Brewery, where Peter works, is based on a real brewery in Rhode Island. Seth MacFarlane grew up in the area and used to drive past the brewery every day. He thought it would be funny to have his lazy cartoon character work at a place that produces something that would make him even lazier. The real brewery owners were initially concerned about being associated with the show, but eventually embraced it when they realized it was bringing them tourists. Let's talk about some of the show's more obscure running gags. You know how Conway Twitty always seems to appear at random moments? This started as an inside joke among the writers who were fans of old country music. They would play Conway Twitty songs during late-night writing sessions to keep themselves awake. Eventually, they decided to work him into the show as a bizarre non sequitur that would confuse viewers and break up the pacing in unexpected ways. The Conway Twitty segments are actually some of the most expensive parts of the show to produce because they have to pay for the music rights. Here's something that'll make you look at Cleveland differently. When Cleveland got his own spin-off show, the original plan was for him to stay in Quahog, and the spin-off would focus on his adventures around town. But the writers realized that would be too limiting, so they created the elaborate storyline where his house gets destroyed and he moves to Virginia. The bathtub falling through multiple houses scene took months to animate and became one of the most memorable moments in the show's history, even though it was essentially just a setup for a spin-off that only lasted 4 seasons. Speaking of spin-offs, did you know that there was almost a Stewie and Brian road trip series? The popularity of their travel episodes convinced executives that the dynamic between the sophisticated baby and the intellectual dog could carry its own show. Scripts were written for 6 episodes before the project was scrapped due to budget concerns. Some of those unused scripts were later reworked into regular Family Guy episodes, which explains why some Stewie and Brian adventures feel more elaborate than usual. Let's get into some animation secrets that most viewers never notice. The way characters' eyes are drawn actually follows a complex mathematical formula to ensure they always look natural when the characters move their heads. This might sound boring, but it's actually fascinating when you realize that most animated shows just wing it and hope for the best. Family Guy's attention to eye movement is part of what makes the characters feel more alive and expressive than typical cartoon characters. Here's a weird fact about the show's merchandising history. The most popular Family Guy product ever sold wasn't a t-shirt or a toy. It was a cookbook called the Family Guy Cookbook that featured recipes supposedly created by each character. Peter's section was all comfort food and beer-based dishes. Lois had elegant dinner party recipes. Stewie contributed sophisticated international cuisine, and Brian's section was dinner for 15, entirely vegetarian. The cookbook actually received positive reviews from real food critics, which nobody expected. Now, for some trivia about the show's cancellation and revival that goes beyond what most people know. When Family Guy was first canceled, Seth MacFarlane was actually relieved. He was exhausted from working on the show and wanted to pursue other projects. But the DVD sales were so strong and the fan campaign so persistent that Fox offered him a deal he couldn't refuse, including complete creative control and a substantial budget increase. This is why the post-cancellation episodes often feel more ambitious and experimental than the early ones. The show's relationship with censors has always been complicated. But here's something most people don't realize. Family Guy actually has one of the most cooperative relationships with network censors of any adult animated show. Seth MacFarlane learned early on that if you give censors multiple options and let them feel like they're part of the creative process, they'll often let you get away with more controversial content. The writers deliberately write jokes they know will get cut, just so they can negotiate to keep the jokes they really want. Let's talk about some character backstories that were developed but never made it into episodes. Quagmire was originally supposed to have a twin brother who was everything he wasn't, completely respectful and monogamous. This character was going to be introduced as a way to explore Quagmire's personality through contrast, but the writers decided it would be funnier to keep him as an irredeemable character without any redemptive family members to soften his edges. Joe Swanson's backstory is much more detailed than what we see on screen. The writers created an entire timeline of his police career before his accident, including the names of his partners, his most famous cases, and even his police academy graduation rank. None of this has ever been mentioned in the show, but it helps the writers keep his character consistent and gives them material to draw from when they need Joe to demonstrate police knowledge or skills. Here's something about the show's music that might surprise you. Every musical number in Family Guy is performed live by the voice actors, even when their characters are supposed to be bad singers. Seth MacFarlane, who has released several jazz albums, insisted on this approach because he believes it makes the musical moments feel more authentic. This means that when Peter sings off-key, Seth MacFarlane is actually deliberately singing badly, which is apparently much harder than just singing well. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons goes deeper than their famous crossover episode. The two shows' writing staffs have been trading jokes and references for years in a friendly rivalry that most viewers never notice. If you watch carefully, you'll spot subtle Simpsons references in Family Guy episodes and vice versa. This tradition started when several Family Guy writers were hired away from The Simpsons, and they maintained friendships with their former colleagues. Now, here's a production fact that explains a lot about the show's pacing. Family Guy episodes are actually written to be about 30 minutes long, but they're edited down to fit the 22-minute television format. This means there are about 8 minutes of content cut from every episode. These deleted scenes aren't just throwaway jokes either. They often contain character development and plot details that would make the episodes feel more complete. Some of these deleted scenes have been released on DVD collections, and they often change how you interpret the episodes. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is completely different from most animated comedies. Instead of having celebrities play themselves or obvious parodies of themselves, Family Guy often casts them as completely random characters. This creates a fun game for viewers who recognize the voices but can't immediately place where they know them from. Adam West playing the mayor was the template for this approach, and it's been incredibly successful at attracting high-profile guest stars who want to try something different. Let's explore some of the show's more philosophical elements that get overlooked because of all the random humor. The relationship between Stewie and Brian is actually a sophisticated exploration of the friendship between youth and experience. Stewie represents unlimited potential and ambition, while Brian represents the reality of compromise and disappointment that comes with age. Their adventures often end with both characters learning something, but in subtle ways that don't feel preachy or forced. The show's treatment of time travel and alternate realities follows surprisingly consistent rules. The writers created an internal logic system for how these sci-fi elements work in the Family Guy universe, even though they rarely explain it to viewers. This attention to detail is why the time travel episodes feel coherent instead of just random, and it allows them to create genuine consequences for the characters' actions across multiple episodes. Here's something about the animation process that most people never consider. Each episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques to make this process more efficient, but it still takes about 8 months from the initial script to the finished episode. This explains why the show sometimes references events that seem outdated by the time the episode airs. The references were current when the episode was being written and animated. The voice recording process is also more complex than most people realize. While some animated shows record all the voices separately, Family Guy often records the main cast together in the same room. This creates more natural-sounding conversations and allows the actors to play off each other's energy. Seth MacFarlane switches between his different character voices during these sessions, which the other actors say is both impressive and slightly disturbing to witness in person. Now for some trivia about the show's impact on popular culture that goes beyond the obvious memes and catchphrases. Family Guy has been credited with popularizing the rapid-fire pop culture reference style that's now common in comedy. Before Family Guy, most TV shows would make 1 or 2 cultural references per episode. Family Guy started making dozens of references per episode, training audiences to catch quick jokes and creating a more interactive viewing experience. The show's influence on internet culture is also significant. Family Guy was one of the first TV shows to embrace online fan communities and viral marketing. The creators regularly engage with fans on social media and have incorporated fan suggestions into actual episodes. This relationship between creators and fans has become the standard for modern entertainment. But Family Guy was pioneering this approach when most TV executives were still afraid of the internet. Finally, here's a fact that brings everything full circle. Despite all the random humor and bizarre storylines, Family Guy is actually one of the most carefully planned shows on television. Every season has an overarching theme that connects the episodes, even though these themes are subtle enough that most viewers don't consciously notice them. The writers map out character development arcs that span multiple seasons, ensuring that even the most outrageous episodes contribute to larger storytelling goals. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, there are people whose full-time job is deciding exactly how long Peter Griffin's fights with a giant chicken should last. Sweet dreams, and may your nights be filled with fewer random cutaway gags than the average Family Guy episode. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy episodes feel like fever dreams that somehow make perfect sense at 3 in the morning? Tonight, we're diving into the most bizarre, unexpected, and downright weird facts about this animated chaos machine that's been keeping us entertained and slightly disturbed for over 2 decades. From secret celebrity cameos you never noticed to production secrets that will change how you watch every episode, these facts are perfect for those late-night rabbit holes when your brain needs something wonderfully random to chew on. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped animation studio, probably surviving on nothing but coffee and pure creative madness, sketching out what would become one of television's most unpredictable shows. But here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy was actually rejected by multiple networks before Fox finally took a chance on it. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that Peter Griffin didn't even have his signature chin dimple. That's right, the most recognizable feature of television's most chaotic dad was an afterthought added later in development. Speaking of Peter Griffin's design, here's a fact that will blow your mind every time you see him on screen. Seth MacFarlane has admitted that Peter's appearance was directly inspired by a security guard he encountered at his college. This unnamed hero of late-night campus safety became the visual foundation for a character who would go on to terrorize animated television for decades. Imagine being that security guard, and randomly discovering years later that you're the face of one of America's most beloved cartoon disasters. But the real magic happens when you start digging into the voice acting secrets. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice the main characters, he performs Stewie, Brian, Peter, and several recurring characters, often having entire conversations with himself during recording sessions. The studio engineers have described these solo recording sessions as watching someone have the world's most entertaining mental breakdown. MacFarlane literally argues with himself, switches between character voices mid-sentence, and somehow maintains the distinct personality of each character flawlessly. Here's where things get really interesting from a production standpoint. The show's writers have a tradition called the random joke jar, where they collect the most absurd, context-free gags throughout the season. When they're stuck on an episode or need to fill time, they literally reach into this jar and randomly select bizarre scenarios to animate. This explains why you'll be watching a normal family dinner scene that suddenly cuts to a 3-minute sequence about a time-traveling sandwich. It's not lazy writing. It's intentionally chaotic creativity with a system behind the madness. The cutaway gags that make Family Guy so distinctive weren't originally planned to be such a huge part of the show. In early episodes, they used these random flashbacks sparingly. But when they noticed these moments got the biggest laughs and the most social media attention, they leaned into the format completely. Now, these seemingly random interruptions are carefully crafted to hit specific comedic beats and often take longer to animate than the main storyline of entire episodes. One of the most mind-bending facts involves the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Many A-list celebrities have appeared on Family Guy without most viewers ever realizing it because their characters are so obscure or brief. Drew Barrymore once voiced a background character who had exactly 3 words of dialogue spread across 2 episodes. The producers love casting major stars in tiny roles as inside jokes for the industry, creating this weird Hollywood treasure hunt for eagle-eyed fans. The character of Stewie Griffin underwent one of television's most subtle character evolutions. In early seasons, Stewie was genuinely intended to be an evil genius baby-plotting world domination. But as the show progressed, the writers began exploring his character's vulnerability and intelligence in different ways. The transition was so gradual that most viewers didn't consciously notice when Stewie evolved from potential supervillain to the show's emotional center and Brian's best friend. This character development happened organically through hundreds of small writing decisions across multiple seasons. Here's something that will change how you watch every Brian and Stewie episode. Their relationship was originally supposed to remain antagonistic throughout the series. The writers planned for Brian to be constantly annoyed by Stewie's schemes and intellectual pretensions. However, the voice acting chemistry between Seth MacFarlane's 2 characters was so natural and compelling that the writers began crafting episodes specifically around their friendship. Some of the show's most acclaimed episodes, including the time travel and multiverse adventures, exist purely because the Brian-Stewie dynamic became too interesting to ignore. The animation process for Family Guy involves secrets that most fans never consider. Each episode requires approximately 4 months from initial script to final animation. But here's the weird part. They often animate scenes completely out of order, based on character availability and studio scheduling. This means the emotional arc of an episode might be animated backwards, with the climactic scenes completed weeks before the setup scenes. The animators have to maintain character continuity and emotional consistency without seeing the full episode in sequence until the very end of production. Musical numbers in Family Guy aren't just random comedic choices. They serve a specific psychological function in the show's pacing. The writers discovered that musical sequences reset viewer attention spans and create natural breaks in the chaotic energy that defines most episodes. When you feel overwhelmed by rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags, a musical number gives your brain permission to reset and re-engage with the storyline. It's basically psychological manipulation disguised as entertainment, and it works perfectly. The show's relationship with censorship creates some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories. Family Guy pushes boundaries so consistently that the network has entire meetings dedicated to determining what crosses the line versus what's cleverly subversive. The writers have become experts at crafting jokes that technically comply with broadcast standards while still managing to be completely inappropriate. They've turned censorship navigation into its own art form, often making the censored versions of jokes funnier than the original uncensored concepts. Here's a fact that demonstrates the show's cultural impact in ways you might not expect. Family Guy references have been spotted in congressional hearings, Supreme Court footnotes, and international diplomatic communications. Politicians and legal scholars apparently watch the show and unconsciously incorporate its humor patterns into serious discourse. There's something simultaneously hilarious and terrifying about the idea that Stewie Griffin's speech patterns are influencing actual government policy discussions. The economics behind Family Guy reveal fascinating insights into modern television production. Each episode costs significantly more to produce than most people realize because of the sheer amount of custom animation required for cutaway gags. A single random flashback sequence might require creating entirely new character designs, backgrounds, and animation styles that will never be used again. The show essentially produces mini-movies within every episode, making it one of the most expensive animated series on television, despite its seemingly simple art style. Voice recording sessions for Family Guy episodes are legendary among industry professionals for their complete unpredictability. Seth MacFarlane often improvises entire scenes in character, creating alternate versions of jokes that the writers never conceived. Sometimes these improvised moments are so funny that entire episode plots get rewritten around a single spontaneous line delivery. The recording booth becomes this weird laboratory where cartoon characters take on lives of their own and influence their own storylines. The show's treatment of controversial topics follows a specific comedy philosophy that Seth MacFarlane has described as equal opportunity offense. The writing team maintains detailed charts tracking which groups, topics, and themes they've targeted to ensure their irreverence remains balanced across the political and social spectrum. This systematic approach to controversy means every offensive joke is part of a larger pattern designed to prevent the show from developing any consistent political agenda beyond general chaos. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, was actually conceived as a way to explore Family Guy's universe from a completely different perspective while maintaining the same comedic DNA. The failed experiment taught the creators valuable lessons about what makes Family Guy specifically work versus what elements translate to other formats. Cleveland's return to Family Guy brought with him subtle character changes informed by his solo series experience, creating this weird continuity where a character evolved through his own failed show. The internet age has transformed how Family Guy episodes are created and consumed. The writers now monitor social media reactions to episodes in real time and adjust future storylines based on which jokes generate the most memes and viral moments. This feedback loop means the show is constantly evolving to match internet culture while simultaneously influencing internet culture. It's become this weird, symbiotic relationship where the show and its online fan base co-create content together. Animation errors in Family Guy often become intentional running gags when fans notice and celebrate them online. The production team has learned to embrace happy accidents, sometimes deliberately recreating animation mistakes in future episodes as callbacks to their own imperfections. This self-aware approach to production errors creates additional layers of humor for dedicated fans while maintaining accessibility for casual viewers. The show's influence on other animated series is more extensive than most people realize. Writing techniques, character development approaches, and comedic timing patterns pioneered by Family Guy appear throughout modern animated television. Shows that seem completely different often use Family Guy's structural innovations adapted to their own specific styles and audiences. It's become the secret template for contemporary animated comedy without most viewers consciously recognizing the influence. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are probably working on next season's episodes, crafting new combinations of chaos and creativity that will eventually become someone else's late-night viewing experience. Family Guy continues to exist in this weird space between sophisticated entertainment and absolute nonsense, providing the perfect mental soundtrack for those moments when your brain needs something familiar yet unpredictable to focus on while the rest of the world sleeps. The show's legacy isn't just about the jokes or the characters. It's about proving that television audiences are capable of appreciating complexity disguised as simplicity, intelligence hidden within apparent randomness, and genuine emotional moments embedded in absolute chaos. Sweet dreams, and may your unconscious mind sort through all this delightful weirdness while you rest. Have you ever wondered why Peter Griffin's laugh is so weirdly infectious, or how Family Guy predicted some of the most bizarre real-world events years before they happened? Tonight, we're diving deep into the most mind-bending facts about Family Guy that will either put you to sleep or keep you awake thinking about how insane this show really is. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through streaming services, and you land on Family Guy. Maybe you've seen every episode a dozen times, or maybe you're just discovering the chaos that is the Griffin family. Either way, there are secrets hidden in plain sight that even the most dedicated fans miss. From voice acting mysteries that will blow your mind to cultural references so obscure they require a PhD to understand, Family Guy is way more complex than anyone gives it credit for. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely true. Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, was supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th. He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but missed it because he was hungover and his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time. That single hangover and scheduling mix-up literally changed television history. Without that random twist of fate, we never would have gotten the Griffin family or any of Seth's other animated shows. But here's where it gets even weirder. Family Guy has this uncanny ability to predict future events that borders on supernatural. Remember the episode where Peter hurts his knee and makes that hissing sound while sucking air through his teeth? That became one of the most recognizable memes on the internet, years before memes were even called memes. The show was creating viral content before viral content existed. Speaking of predictions, Family Guy called out Kevin Spacey's behavior in a 2005 episode where Stewie runs naked through a shopping mall and someone says, "Somebody call the police." And another character responds, "I think Kevin Spacey already did. This was more than a decade before the Kevin Spacey scandal broke. How do the writers keep nailing these things?" It's like they have a crystal ball hidden in their writing room. The voice acting situation is absolutely bonkers when you really think about it. Seth MacFarlane voices Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Stewie Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewterschmidt, among others. That means he's literally having conversations with himself for huge chunks of every episode. Imagine being in the recording booth talking to yourself as different characters for hours on end. It's like method acting taken to an extreme level. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, also voices Trisha Takanawa and several other female characters. During the early seasons, she was actually a writer on Mad TV, which explains why some of the humor has that sketch comedy feel. The woman can switch between Lois's nasally Long Island accent and Trisha's professional news anchor voice seamlessly. Voice actors don't get nearly enough credit for their range. Here's a fact that will mess with your head. The show was actually canceled twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But then something magical happened. Adult Swim started showing reruns, and DVD sales went through the roof. Fox realized they had made a massive mistake and brought the show back in 2005. Then they canceled it again in 2009, but fan outcry was so intense they reversed the decision within weeks. Family Guy is like a cockroach in the best possible way. It just refuses to die. The animation process is way more complicated than you might think. Each episode takes about 10 months to complete, from initial script to final animation. The overseas animation studios in South Korea handle most of the actual drawing, while the American team focuses on storyboarding and voice work. It's a global operation just to make Peter fall down the stairs in a funny way. Brian Griffin's character is loosely based on a real dog that Seth MacFarlane's family had when he was growing up. The real Brian was apparently much better behaved than his cartoon counterpart, though. He didn't drink martinis or write terrible novels or have existential crises about being a dog. The fictional Brian's pretentious intellectual personality came from Seth's observations of people he knew in college who took themselves way too seriously. The Conway Twitty cutaway gags started as an inside joke among the writers, but became this legendary running bit that fans either love or hate with no middle ground. These segments where the show just cuts to Conway Twitty performing a complete song were meant to be the most random non-sequiturs possible. The fact that they kept doing it even when fans complained just made it funnier to the writers. It's comedy through pure stubbornness. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. Seth MacFarlane has given different answers in interviews ranging from Stewie being gay to being sexually fluid to being too young for any of it to matter. The ambiguity seems intentional. Stewie exists in this weird space where he's simultaneously a baby and this sophisticated character with adult concerns. It's like the writers are deliberately keeping us guessing. The show's relationship with censorship is fascinating. Standards and practices at Fox let certain things slide while being strict about others in ways that seem completely arbitrary. Characters can be violently injured in cartoonish ways, but heaven forbid someone says a particular word or shows too much animated skin. The writers have turned working around censorship into an art form. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, ran for 4 seasons and was actually pretty decent, but never found the same audience as Family Guy. When Cleveland moved back to Quahog, it felt like a homecoming. Mike Henry, who voiced Cleveland, stepped down from the role in 2020, citing the need for black actors to voice black characters. The recasting brought Arif Zahir into the role, and honestly, the transition was seamless. The show's pop culture references are so dense you could teach entire courses on them. From obscure 1,980 seconds commercials to deep cuts from classic Hollywood movies, the writers assume their audience has an encyclopedic knowledge of American media history. Some references are so specific that you need to be a certain age and from a particular region to get them. It's like they're rewarding viewers for paying attention to decades of television and movies. Peter Griffin's job at the brewery is based on real brewery operations that Seth MacFarlane researched. The Pawtucket Patriot beer is obviously a parody of Samuel Adams, but the actual brewery dynamics and workplace situations are surprisingly accurate. Peter's incompetence is exaggerated for comedy, but apparently real brewery workers have told the writers that some of their workplace storylines hit uncomfortably close to home. The show's theme song is performed by Walter Murphy, who also composed music for Saturday Night Fever. Having a disco legend write your cartoon theme song is the kind of random collaboration that only happens in Hollywood. The orchestral arrangement gives the show this grand, cinematic feel that contrasts perfectly with the chaotic family dynamics. Meg Griffin is voiced by Mila Kunis, who was just 15 years old when she started the role. She's grown up with the character in a way that's pretty unique for voice acting. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg in the first season before scheduling conflicts forced her to step down. The transition happened so smoothly that most viewers didn't even notice the change. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over 20-plus seasons. Early episodes had this rougher hand-drawn quality, while newer episodes are much more polished and computer-assisted. You can literally watch the technology advance by comparing episodes from different eras. The character designs have become more standardized, but somehow less distinctive. Family Guy's influence on internet culture is immeasurable. Before YouTube compilation videos existed, fans were trading Family Guy clips on early file-sharing networks. The show basically invented the concept of animated content going viral. Cutaway gags are perfect for social media because they're self-contained comedy bits that work without context. The writer's room must be absolute chaos. How do you pitch ideas for a show where literally anything can happen? The creative process seems to involve taking normal family situations and pushing them to the most extreme possible conclusions. It's like improv comedy, but with months of animation work required to execute each joke. Seth MacFarlane's other projects, like The Orville and his music albums, show his range beyond comedy, but Family Guy remains his most recognizable creation. The show has become this cultural touchstone that defines a particular era of animated television. Love it or hate it, you can't ignore its impact. The merchandising empire around Family Guy is surprisingly extensive. From t-shirts featuring Stewie's quotes to Peter Griffin action figures, the show has spawned countless products. The fact that people want to wear clothing featuring cartoon characters making inappropriate jokes says something profound about modern comedy consumption. Here's something that will keep you thinking as you drift off to sleep. Family Guy exists in this weird space between family sitcom and surreal comedy experiment. It's simultaneously the most normal and most bizarre show on television. The Griffin family deals with everyday problems, like paying bills and getting along with neighbors. But they also travel through time, fight giant chickens, and have musical numbers about random topics. The show's longevity is a testament to something deeper than just comedy. It's comfort food for your brain. Even when the jokes don't land, there's something familiar and reassuring about Peter's voice or Stewie's elaborate schemes. It's like spending time with dysfunctional friends who make you feel better about your own problems. As you close your eyes tonight, maybe you'll dream about cutaway gags from your own life, or imagine what it would be like to have conversations with your pet, like Brian and the Griffin family. Or maybe you'll just sleep soundly, knowing that somewhere in the world, animators are working on the next episode where Peter does something incredibly stupid and somehow everything works out fine. Sweet dreams, and remember, we all have a little bit of Griffin family chaos in our lives. The difference is, their chaos gets turned into comedy gold, while ours just makes us tired. At least now you know some random Family Guy facts that are just weird enough to either bore you to sleep or keep you awake. Wondering what other secrets are hidden in your favorite animated shows? Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you, others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth MacFarlane comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrien yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrien Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full three-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty, and this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Skyvo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth MacFarlane during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case,
ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrian Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about male condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The Internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, it's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrian Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Dax Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear. Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. Think you know everything about your favorite fictional families? Tonight, I'm about to shatter everything you thought you knew about the characters we grew up watching. What if I told you that beneath the laughs and heartwarming moments, these beloved family shows have been hiding some seriously dark psychological truths? Get ready, because we're diving deep into the twisted minds of television's most iconic families, and trust me, you'll never look at them the same way again. Welcome back to another mind-bending exploration, where we peel back the layers of pop culture to reveal the uncomfortable realities lurking beneath the surface. I'm your host, and today we're embarking on a journey that will fundamentally change how you view family dynamics on screen. We're not just talking about quirky character traits or funny running gags here. We're exposing genuine psychological disorders, toxic behaviors, and dysfunctional patterns that would make any therapist's notebook overflow with red flags. Have you ever wondered why certain family sitcoms feel so uncomfortably familiar? Why we laugh at situations that, in real life, would have us calling social services? That's because these shows, intentionally or not, mirror the darkest aspects of human psychology wrapped in a comedic package. Tonight, we are unwrapping that package and examining what's really inside. Let's start with something that might shock you about animated families. You know those characters we quote daily and consider harmless entertainment? Well, they're actually perfect case studies for some of the most destructive personality traits known to psychology. Take the concept of narcissistic behavior patterns, for instance. We see characters who consistently put their own desires above family welfare, manipulate situations to benefit themselves, and show zero empathy for others' suffering. Consider how often we witness parents in these shows making decisions that directly harm their children's emotional development. They dismiss their kids' feelings, mock their aspirations, and create environments where psychological safety doesn't exist. Yet we laugh because it's presented as comedy. The truth is, if these behaviors occurred in real families, we'd recognize them as forms of emotional abuse. But the darkness goes deeper than individual character flaws. These shows often normalize dysfunction by presenting it as typical family life. Children viewers internalize these relationship patterns as normal, potentially carrying these toxic blueprints into their own future families. It's a cycle that perpetuates unhealthy dynamics across generations, all disguised as entertainment. Let's examine the phenomenon of scapegoating within fictional families. There's almost always that one family member who bears the brunt of everyone else's dysfunction. They become the emotional dumping ground, the target of ridicule, and the convenient explanation for all family problems. This character serves as the family's pressure valve, allowing other members to avoid confronting their own issues by projecting everything onto this unfortunate soul. What's particularly disturbing is how these scapegoated characters are often portrayed as deserving their treatment. The show's narrative subtly suggests that their suffering is justified, teaching audiences that certain people are acceptable targets for cruelty. This psychological manipulation is incredibly sophisticated and deeply harmful, especially when absorbed by impressionable viewers. Moving on to another dark pattern, we see frequent examples of emotional manipulation disguised as parental love. Characters use guilt, shame, and conditional affection to control family members' behavior. They withdraw love as punishment and offer it as reward, creating anxious attachment patterns that would haunt real children for life. The scary part is how these manipulation tactics are often presented as caring parental behavior. Financial dynamics in these fictional families also reveal disturbing truths about power and control. Money becomes a weapon used to maintain dominance hierarchies within the family unit. Characters leverage financial dependency to strip away others' autonomy, creating situations where family members must choose between self-respect and survival. This economic abuse rarely gets labeled as such within the show's context, but it's a form of domestic violence nonetheless. Then there's the normalization of substance abuse as a coping mechanism for family stress. Characters regularly turn to alcohol or other substances to deal with their dysfunctional relationships, and this behavior is consistently portrayed as acceptable or even admirable. The message sent is that chemical numbing is preferable to addressing underlying problems, a philosophy that has destroyed countless real families. The violence, both physical and emotional, that permeates these shows is staggering when you really analyze it. Characters assault each other, destroy property in fits of rage, and engage in psychological warfare that would traumatize actual family members. Yet because it's animated or comedic, we're conditioned to view this violence as harmless fun rather than recognizing it as abusive behavior that mirrors real-world domestic violence patterns. What about the complete absence of healthy conflict resolution in these families? Disagreements escalate to explosive confrontations, problems get swept under the rug rather than addressed, and family members hold grudges that span entire seasons. There's never any genuine communication, compromise, or emotional growth. Instead, conflicts either explode into chaos or get ignored until they fester into something worse. The gender dynamics in these shows often perpetuate harmful stereotypes that reinforce toxic relationship patterns. Male characters are frequently portrayed as bumbling, emotionally unavailable, and incapable of basic actions. Adulting skills. Female characters often become long-suffering martyrs who enable bad behavior while sacrificing their own needs. These portrayals normalize codependency and emotional labor imbalances that plague real relationships. Let's talk about the children in these fictional families, because their treatment is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. They're often parentified, forced to take on adult responsibilities while their actual parents remain childlike. They become emotional caretakers for dysfunctional adults, a role reversal that stunts their development and robs them of childhood innocence. The shows present this as maturity or responsibility, but it's actually a form of childhood emotional abuse. The sibling dynamics portrayed are equally problematic, characterized by intense competition, jealousy, and cruelty. Siblings are pitted against each other for parental attention and approval, creating lifelong rivalries rather than supportive bonds. The message conveyed is that family members are competitors rather than allies, fostering an environment where trust and cooperation become impossible. Privacy and personal boundaries are consistently violated in these fictional families. Characters rifle through each other's belongings, eavesdrop on private conversations, and invade personal space without consequence. This normalized boundary violation teaches viewers that family members don't deserve privacy or respect, setting up expectations that healthy relationships cannot meet. The way mental health issues are handled in these shows is particularly troubling. Characters displaying clear signs of depression, anxiety, or other psychological conditions are mocked rather than supported. Their struggles become punchlines rather than opportunities for compassion and understanding. This portrayal stigmatizes mental health challenges and discourages seeking help. Perhaps most disturbing is how these shows handle consequences for toxic behavior. Characters rarely face meaningful repercussions for their harmful actions. They might receive temporary comeuppance, but by the next episode, they're back to their destructive patterns without any real change or growth. This lack of consequences suggests that toxic behavior is acceptable as long as you're family. The enablement that occurs within these family systems is staggering. Instead of holding destructive family members accountable, other characters make excuses, cover up problems, and adapt their own behavior to accommodate dysfunction. This teaches viewers that enabling is loving, and that challenging toxic behavior is disloyal, perspectives that trap people in abusive relationships. Financial irresponsibility is often glorified in these shows, with characters making impulsive decisions that endanger their family's security. Yet there are rarely long-term consequences for these choices, sending the message that financial stability is unimportant and that someone else will always clean up the mess. This attitude contributes to cycles of poverty and instability in real families. The constant chaos and unpredictability in these fictional homes would be traumatic for real children. There's no stability, security, or peace. Instead, children live in environments where they never know what crisis will erupt next, what mood their parents will be in, or whether their basic needs will be met. This chronic stress would cause lasting developmental damage in reality. What's particularly insidious is how these shows use humor to make abuse palatable. When terrible behavior is packaged as comedy, our psychological defenses are lowered. We laugh at situations that should horrify us, gradually becoming desensitized to toxicity. This comedic reframing is a powerful tool that makes dysfunction seem normal and acceptable. The isolation these fictional families experience from healthy outside relationships is another red flag. They rarely maintain friendships or connections with functional people who might challenge their toxic patterns. This isolation prevents reality testing and allows dysfunction to flourish unchecked, much like how abusive relationships cut victims off from support systems. The power dynamics within these families are often rigidly hierarchical and authoritarian rather than collaborative and democratic. Decisions are made by whoever has the most power, regardless of how those decisions affect other family members. This teaches children that relationships are about dominance and submission, rather than mutual respect and partnership. Educational neglect is rampant in these fictional families, with parents showing little interest in their children's learning or development. Academic achievement is either ignored or mocked, extracurricular activities are dismissed as unimportant, and intellectual curiosity is discouraged. This attitude toward education perpetuates cycles of underachievement and limits children's future opportunities. The way these shows handle emotions is deeply problematic. Genuine feelings are ridiculed, emotional expression is punished, and vulnerability is treated as weakness. Family members learn to suppress their authentic selves to survive, creating fake personas while their true needs go unmet. This emotional suppression leads to profound psychological damage over time. Perhaps most tragically, these fictional families never model what healthy relationships actually look like. Viewers, especially children, don't see examples of mutual respect, effective communication, genuine affection, or supportive problem-solving. Without these positive models, they lack blueprints for creating healthier relationships in their own lives. The normalization of chaos as family life is perhaps the most damaging message these shows convey. They suggest that dysfunction is inevitable, that all families are messed up, and that toxic behavior is just part of human nature. This fatalistic view prevents people from recognizing that healthy families do exist and that change is possible with effort and commitment. As we wrap up this disturbing journey through the psychology of fictional families, I want you to consider how these portrayals might have influenced your own expectations about family life. Have you normalized behaviors in your own relationships that you wouldn't accept from strangers? Have you laughed off red flags that deserved serious attention? Have you repeated patterns you learned from these shows without questioning their healthiness? The power of media to shape our understanding of normal is immense, and these family shows wield that power irresponsibly. They present dysfunction as entertainment, while failing to acknowledge the real pain such behaviors cause in actual families. By recognizing these patterns, we can begin to break free from toxic blueprints and create healthier relationships. Remember, just because something is common doesn't make it healthy. And just because something makes us laugh doesn't mean it's harmless. Real families deserve better than the chaos and cruelty we've been taught to accept as normal. You deserve better. Your future family deserves better. If this analysis has opened your eyes to patterns in your own life, consider seeking support from mental health professionals who can help you develop healthier relationship skills. Remember that recognizing dysfunction is the first step toward healing, and that breaking cycles of toxicity is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and future generations. What did you think of this deep dive into the dark psychology of fictional families? Did any of these patterns surprise you? Or did they confirm suspicions you already had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that challenges the narratives we've been fed. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and most importantly, stay committed to creating healthier relationships than the ones we see on screen. What if I told you that one cartoon dad has a higher body count than most movie villains? Today we're diving deep into the chaotic world of Peter Griffin and counting every single person this animated maniac has eliminated. Trust me, the numbers are absolutely insane. Most people think Peter Griffin is just a lovable goofball who makes stupid mistakes. But when you actually sit down and track his actions across hundreds of Family Guy episodes, a terrifying pattern emerges. This isn't just some clumsy dad bumbling through life. This is a walking disaster zone who leaves destruction wherever he goes. I spent weeks combing through every Family Guy episode, taking notes, rewinding scenes, and meticulously documenting each incident. What I discovered shocked me. Peter Griffin isn't just accidentally dangerous. He's legitimately one of the most prolific killers in television history. And the worst part? He never faces any real consequences. Let's start from the very beginning with Peter's first confirmed elimination. In only the second episode of the entire series, Peter runs down the Roadrunner from Looney Tunes while driving, just flattens the poor bird completely. When asked if he hit something, Peter casually dismisses it and keeps driving. That casual attitude toward taking a life, it sets the tone for everything that follows. The very next episode, things escalate dramatically. A tour bus pulls up to the Griffin house, and Peter completely loses his mind. He grabs a shotgun and opens fire on the entire vehicle. 3 people eliminated just like that. His reaction to seeing strangers at his door was immediate violence. No questions asked. No attempt at communication. Just grab a weapon and start shooting. Then there's the hospital incident that really showcases Peter's dangerous incompetence. Somehow this man was allowed to work as a doctor, which should have been a red flag for everyone involved. During what appears to be a routine procedure, Peter's negligence directly leads to a patient's death. The fact that he was even permitted near medical equipment shows a serious breakdown in the system. But Peter's killing spree really picks up steam when he temporarily takes over Death's job. With supernatural powers at his disposal, Peter becomes exponentially more dangerous. He kills 2 airline pilots mid-flight simply by touching them. Thousands of passengers could have died if not for quick thinking from another character who managed to land the plane. Peter's reaction to nearly causing a massive aviation disaster? He jokes about needing mittens. The pattern becomes clear early on. Peter has zero regard for human life and even less understanding of consequences. When tasked with simple babysitting duties, he leaves an infant to drown in a bathtub. His parenting instincts are so fundamentally broken that he can't even keep a baby alive for one evening. Speaking of children, Peter's relationship with kids is consistently disturbing. When he briefly works as a nanny dressed up like Mary Poppins, 2 children end up dead and hidden under a bed. These weren't accidents or misunderstandings. Peter's presence in any childcare situation inevitably leads to tragedy. But the really chilling moments come when Peter turns his violence toward his own family. In one episode, his negligence with home repairs leads to carbon monoxide poisoning that kills Lois, Chris, and Meg. Even though they're miraculously fine in the next episode, Peter's actions directly cause their deaths. A husband and father who accidentally kills his entire family should be traumatized for life. Peter just moves on like nothing happened. The mob-style execution of Brian over some leftover food shows Peter's capacity for cold-blooded murder. When his dog eats his chicken and drinks his cream soda, Peter responds with gangster-level violence. The casual way he eliminates a family member over such trivial matters reveals the true depth of his sociopathic tendencies. Peter's parenting philosophy seems to involve extreme violence as conflict resolution. When his daughter faces bullying at school, instead of speaking to teachers or parents, Peter takes matters into his own hands. The bully doesn't survive the encounter. Later, when presenting what he thinks is the bully's head to his son, Peter admits he got the wrong kid entirely. He murdered an innocent deaf child by mistake and shows no remorse whatsoever. The axe murder of Cleveland represents a turning point where Peter's violence becomes increasingly graphic and disturbing. This isn't cartoon slapstick anymore. This is genuine horror movie material. The casual way Peter wields deadly weapons against friends and neighbors shows a complete break from reality and basic human decency. From this point forward, Peter's methods become increasingly brutal, and his body count starts climbing exponentially. The chainsaw massacres alone account for dozens of victims. Peter goes from house to house like a serial killer, methodically eliminating anyone in his path. The fact that he seems to enjoy this level of violence makes it even more disturbing. One of the most senseless killings involves Peter murdering a child just to steal a jet ski. When his family points out they're literally standing next to their boat, Peter ignores them and commits homicide anyway. This isn't about necessity or even twisted logic. This is pure evil masked as comedy. The restaurant incident where Peter kills a woman named Erica while trying to prove his cooking skills demonstrates how his ego and incompetence create deadly combinations. Peter's need to show off constantly puts innocent people in mortal danger. Peter's involvement in sports inevitably leads to casualties. Every athletic activity he participates in somehow results in someone's death. Whether it's shot put, treasure hunting, or any other recreational activity, Peter transforms harmless fun into lethal encounters. The drunk driving incidents reveal another layer of Peter's criminal behavior. He openly admits to calculating exactly how much alcohol he can consume while still being able to drive. This premeditated approach to endangering others shows Peter knows his actions are dangerous, but simply doesn't care about the consequences. The Boston Marathon Massacre stands out as one of Peter's most heinous acts. Running down dozens of innocent runners during a major sporting event crosses the line from accidental violence into mass murder territory. The casualty count from this single incident rivals actual terrorist attacks. Peter's racism leads to deadly encounters as well. His casual bigotry creates situations where innocent people lose their lives simply for existing in Peter's presence. The Anthropology store incident perfectly captures how Peter's prejudices fuel his violent tendencies. When Peter briefly becomes death incarnate, his kill count skyrockets through supernatural means. Having the literal power of life and death in Peter's hands is like giving a nuclear weapon to a toddler. The pilots who die simply from Peter's touch represent just the beginning of the carnage. The hospital bombings showcase Peter's evolution into full-scale terrorism. Destroying entire medical facilities because he disagrees with vaccines makes Peter an anti-science extremist willing to commit mass murder for his beliefs. The estimated casualty counts from these attacks reach into the hundreds. Peter's accidental involvement with actual terrorists leads to multiple explosive incidents. His friendship with a terrorist operative results in several bombings throughout the city. Even when Peter tries to do the right thing by helping authorities, he ends up triggering more explosions that kill dozens of innocent people. The Secret Society incident demonstrates Peter's capacity for large-scale destruction. Burning down an entire facility housing historical documents leads to hundreds of deaths. Peter's inability to consider consequences means every action he takes has the potential for massive collateral damage. The presidential fight with Donald Trump represents the peak of Peter's destructive potential. Their brawl triggers nuclear missile launches that devastate multiple population centers. The casualty count from this single incident reaches into the thousands. Peter literally causes acts of war through his inability to control his temper. But none of Peter's individual acts of violence compare to his ongoing feud with Ernie the Giant Chicken. This running conflict has resulted in more deaths and destruction than actual wars. Every encounter between these two characters leaves dozens of innocent bystanders dead. Their first major battle destroys multiple vehicles, causes plane crashes, and brings down entire buildings. The Ferry Wheel incident alone accounts for hundreds of casualties as the massive structure rolls through populated areas. Their fights aren't contained conflicts between two individuals. They're citywide disasters that claim enormous numbers of innocent lives. The cruise ship battle represents the most destructive single incident in their ongoing war. When their fight moves into the engine room, they lose control of a massive passenger vessel that crashes into a major city. The resulting destruction levels multiple city blocks and kills hundreds of people. This single incident qualifies as one of the worst maritime disasters in history. Their time travel battle creates paradoxes that threaten the fabric of reality itself. When Peter and Ernie use time manipulation technology to continue their fight across multiple historical periods, they create cascading effects that alter the course of human history. The scientist who created the time machine becomes an early casualty of their temporal warfare. The NASA facility destruction shows how their conflict has escalated beyond Earth itself. Their space battle crashes back to the planet and destroys an ocean oil rig, adding environmental disaster to their already impressive list of crimes against humanity. The reverse time sequence battle creates some of the most confusing and deadly encounters in their entire conflict. When everything starts happening backwards, the destruction becomes even more widespread and incomprehensible. Plane crashes, building collapses, and mass casualties all blend together in a chaotic symphony of violence. When you calculate the total casualties from just the Peter versus Ernie conflicts, the number reaches nearly 1,500 deaths. This means half of Peter's entire body count comes from a single ongoing dispute that started over an expired coupon. The fact that such trivial origins led to such massive destruction perfectly encapsulates Peter's character. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcases Peter's ability to bring his destructive tendencies to other fictional universes. His fight with Homer Simpson levels significant portions of Springfield and adds another 100 casualties to his count. Even when visiting other shows, Peter cannot help but create mayhem and death. Throughout all of these incidents, certain patterns emerge that make Peter's behavior even more disturbing. He shows no remorse for any of his actions. He never learns from his mistakes or attempts to modify his behavior. Most importantly, he faces no meaningful consequences for any of his crimes. The legal system in Peter's universe seems completely incapable of holding him accountable. Despite committing mass murder on multiple occasions, Peter continues to walk free and repeat his destructive patterns. This creates a world where violence has no consequences and human life has no value. Peter's family and friends enable his behavior by treating his mass murder sprees as minor inconveniences rather than serious crimes. When someone consistently kills innocent people, the appropriate response is not to laugh it off and wait for the next episode. The normalization of Peter's violence makes everyone around him complicit in his crimes. The media within Peter's world also fails to adequately report on his actions. Despite causing multiple disasters that should dominate news cycles for months, Peter's crimes are quickly forgotten and life returns to normal. This unrealistic portrayal of consequences sends dangerous messages about accountability and justice. When you add up every death directly attributable to Peter Griffin's actions, the final count reaches approximately 2,800 people. This makes him one of the most prolific killers in entertainment history. For context, this body count exceeds many actual historical mass murderers and rivals casualty figures from major military conflicts. The fact that this level of violence is presented as comedy raises serious questions about desensitization to violence in media. When mass murder becomes a punchline, society loses. Important moral boundaries that separate acceptable behavior from criminal acts. Peter Griffin represents the logical extreme of consequence-free violence in entertainment. His character demonstrates what happens when someone with destructive tendencies faces no accountability for their actions. The result is escalating violence that eventually reaches genocidal proportions. The most disturbing aspect of Peter's character is how his violence is often portrayed as justified or at least understandable. Whether defending his family, pursuing his goals, or simply satisfying his curiosity, Peter's murderous actions are presented within contexts that make them seem reasonable to viewers. This normalization of extreme violence has real-world implications for how audiences process and respond to actual violence in their daily lives. When fictional characters commit mass murder without consequences, it becomes easier to dismiss real violence as less serious than it actually is. The Peter Griffin phenomenon also reveals how comedy can be used to mask serious social problems. By presenting his violent tendencies as humorous character quirks, rather than serious mental health issues, the show avoids confronting the deeper implications of his behavior. In conclusion, Peter Griffin's body count of 2,800 people makes him one of the deadliest characters in television history. His casual approach to mass murder, combined with the complete lack of consequences he faces, creates a character who embodies the worst aspects of unchecked violence and social irresponsibility. While Family Guy presents his actions as comedy, the sheer scale of death and destruction he causes reveals a character who belongs in prison rather than primetime television. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the most dysfunctional family on television. Today we're talking about something that's been bothering me for years watching Family Guy. Peter Griffin might be an absolute disaster of a human being, but honestly, his wife Lois has pulled some stunts that would make any reasonable person run straight to a divorce lawyer. I'm talking about moments so outrageous, so completely unforgivable, that you'll be questioning how this marriage even survived. We're counting down the 5 most shocking times Peter should have packed his bags and never looked back. Trust me when I say number 1 is going to blow your mind because it involves a certain pop star and some seriously questionable decisions. But before we jump in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we've got tons more Family Guy content coming your way. Let's kick things off with number 5. And honestly, this one still makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it. Picture this. Lois Griffin, the supposedly devoted wife and mother, decides to have an affair with none other than former President Bill Clinton. Yeah, you heard that right. The President of the United States. Now, I know Family Guy is known for its outrageous storylines, but this one crosses every possible line you can imagine. The whole mess starts when Clinton rolls into Quahog for what's supposed to be an innocent beauty contest judging gig. His presidential limo conveniently breaks down right in front of the Griffin house, and suddenly Peter finds himself starstruck by his new famous friend. At first, it seems harmless enough, just 2 guys hanging out causing minor mischief around town. But then Lois discovers Peter looking absolutely terrible the next morning, and she is not having it, especially when she finds out he brought home a random pig from their adventures. Now, here's where any normal person would just have a conversation with their pig spouse about boundaries and responsibility. But Lois Griffin is not normal people. Instead of talking to Peter directly, she marches herself over to Clinton's hotel room to give the former president a piece of her mind about corrupting her husband. Big mistake. And I mean astronomically huge mistake. Because the next thing you know, she's completely fallen for Clinton's legendary charm. The situation goes from bad to absolutely catastrophic when Peter walks in to find his wife in bed with the president. Can you even imagine that moment? The betrayal, the shock, the complete destruction of everything you thought you knew about your marriage. Peter literally catches them in the act, and Lois has the audacity to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness like this is just some minor marital hiccup. But here's the part that really gets me. Instead of demanding answers or showing any kind of backbone, Peter just accepts her pathetic excuse and even agrees to her twisted proposal that he can sleep with anyone he wants to get even. The whole situation is so messed up that even when Peter chooses to get revenge with Lois's own mother, the moral compass of this family is just completely broken. What makes this even worse is that this isn't just about physical betrayal, it's about the complete lack of respect Lois shows for her marriage and family. She throws away decades of marriage for a quick fling with a politician and somehow expects everything to just go back to normal. Any self-respecting person would have walked away right then and there, but not Peter Griffin. Moving on to number 4, and this one might actually be worse, because it involves someone who should be completely off limits. Meg's teenage boyfriend, Anthony. Now, I know what you're thinking. Meg actually managed to get a boyfriend. That's shocking enough on its own, but what Lois does next is absolutely unforgivable and frankly pretty disturbing. Anthony seems like a decent kid, probably the first normal person to show any interest in Meg, ever. Peter and Lois are initially thrilled that their daughter finally found someone. But then Anthony makes one innocent compliment about Lois looking like a movie star, and suddenly she's acting like a predator stalking her prey. The whole thing starts innocently enough with Lois just feeling flattered by the attention, but then she completely loses her mind and starts fantasizing about this underage kid. We're talking about a grown woman in her 40s getting worked up over a teenage boy who's dating her own daughter. The levels of wrong here are just astronomical, and it gets so much worse. Lois doesn't just fantasize, she takes action. She literally creates a schedule showing when Peter will be out of the house and when she'll be available. She hands this to a minor, along with details about her personal life that no teenager should ever know about. The predatory behavior is so blatant and disturbing that it's honestly hard to watch. When she finally makes her move and tries to seduce Anthony, the kid is surprisingly into it, which somehow makes the whole situation even more disturbing. But of course, Meg walks in at the worst possible moment and catches her own mother trying to hook up with her boyfriend. The emotional damage this causes to Meg is something that family will probably never recover from. The worst part about this whole scenario is how Lois handles getting caught. Instead of taking responsibility for her completely inappropriate behavior, she manipulates the situation to make herself the victim. She tells Peter that he makes her feel old and ugly, essentially blaming him for her decision to prey on a teenager. And Peter, being the spineless disaster that he is, actually apologizes to her, and the whole thing gets swept under the rug like nothing happened. This right here should have been the end of their marriage. There's no coming back from trying to sleep with your daughter's underage boyfriend. The betrayal of trust. The emotional damage to Meg. The complete breakdown of appropriate boundaries. It's all unforgivable. But somehow, Peter just lets it slide, and life goes on as normal in the Griffin household. Coming in at number 3, we have the time Lois discovered gambling and literally bet away the family car at a casino. This one starts innocently enough, with the family taking a road trip to help Chris with his Boy Scout troubles. Peter, being Peter, refuses to ask for directions, even when they're clearly lost, and the situation gets worse when he needs to make an emergency bathroom stop at a Native American casino. While Peter handles his business, Lois finds herself with some free time, and that's when she spots the poker machines. Now, for most people, this would be a harmless distraction, maybe lose a few dollars and move on with your day. But Lois Griffin has zero impulse control, and within minutes, she's completely hooked on gambling. The addiction happens so fast, it's actually frightening to watch. One minute she's just curious about the flashing lights and sounds, the next minute she's feeding money into these machines like her life depends on it. Peter literally has to drag her away from the gambling floor when it's time to leave, but the damage is already done. Lois has caught the gambling bug, and it's about to destroy everything. Here's where the story goes from concerning to absolutely insane. While Peter is distracted, Lois manages to lose the family car in a poker game. She literally gambles away their primary means of transportation, stranding the entire family at a casino in the middle of nowhere. The level of irresponsibility and selfishness it takes to make that kind of decision is just staggering. Peter ends up having to pretend to be Native American and spend a night hungry in the forest just to win back their car through some ridiculous tribal challenge. The fact that he actually pulls this off is a miracle, but that doesn't excuse what Lois did. She put her entire family at risk because she couldn't control herself around some flashing lights and the sound of coins dropping. The gambling addiction reveals something really dark about Lois's character. She's willing to sacrifice her family's security and well-being for the temporary thrill of potentially winning money. This isn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. It's a fundamental character flaw that shows she can't be trusted with important decisions. Any reasonable person would have serious doubts about continuing a marriage with someone who would gamble away the family car on a whim. What makes this even more frustrating is that there are no real consequences for Lois's actions. Peter saves the day, gets the car back, and they all go home like nothing happened. There's no discussion about gambling addiction, no acknowledgement of how her behavior could have left them stranded, no recognition that this kind of impulse control problem might be a serious issue in their marriage. Now we're getting to the really disturbing stuff, with number 2, where Lois reads one book about minimalism and completely loses her mind in the most destructive way possible. This episode perfectly captures how Lois tends to take any new idea and push it to absolutely insane extremes without any regard for how it affects her family. The whole disaster starts when Lois discovers a book about decluttering and minimalism. The basic concept is pretty reasonable: getting rid of unnecessary stuff to focus on what truly brings you joy. Most people would maybe clean out a closet or donate some old clothes, but not Lois Griffin. She decides that minimalism means literally throwing away everything and everyone in her life that doesn't spark immediate happiness. The author of this minimalism book claims to have learned these revolutionary insights by meditating on a bridge in Asia, which should have been a red flag that this isn't exactly scientific advice. But Lois is so desperate to find meaning in her life that she latches onto this philosophy like it's going to solve all her problems. What starts as organizing and decluttering quickly escalates to Lois throwing away family belongings without permission. She's making unilateral decisions about what brings the family joy, completely ignoring everyone else's feelings and attachments to their possessions. The lack of consideration for her family's feelings and the authoritarian way she starts controlling everyone's lives is just incredibly toxic. But then Lois takes it to the ultimate extreme and decides that her own family doesn't bring her enough joy, so she kicks them out of the house. Peter, Chris, Meg, Brian, and Stewie all end up living in a storage unit while Lois enjoys her empty minimalist paradise. Can you imagine throwing your own children out of their home because a self-help book told you to focus on joy? This is abandonment of the highest order. The situation gets even more surreal when Lois decides that she herself is clutter and needs to be thrown away. She literally abandons her family completely, leaving behind only a vague note before disappearing entirely. Her husband and children have no idea where she is or if she's even alive. This level of selfish behavior goes way beyond any normal marital problems. It takes Lois falling into an actual garbage barge and nearly drowning in trash for her to realize that maybe throwing away your entire family wasn't the brilliant idea she thought it was. She comes back home babbling about how garbage is wonderful and everything is garbage, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence that she's learned anything meaningful from this experience. The fact that Peter just welcomes her back after she abandoned the entire family shows an incredible lack of self-respect. Lois literally threw away her marriage and her children because a book told her to focus on joy, and somehow that's just something they all move past, like it was a minor disagreement about dinner plans. Finally, we reach number 1, and this is the most disturbing example of all. Lois has a midlife crisis meltdown and ends up trying to seduce Justin Bieber, who at the time was clearly underage. This isn't just inappropriate behavior, this is straight-up predatory and potentially criminal activity. The whole nightmare begins when Lois is feeling down about getting older, and Peter makes everything worse by reading her a birthday poem that basically lists all the ways she's aged and become less attractive. Now, granted, Peter's poem is incredibly insensitive and hurtful, but that doesn't justify what Lois does next. Instead of having an adult conversation about feeling unappreciated, or seeking therapy, or literally any other healthy coping mechanism, Lois decides to have a complete psychological breakdown. She starts dressing like a teenager and acting like she's in high school again, which is already embarrassing enough for a middle-aged mother. But then, things take a turn into seriously illegal territory when Justin Bieber comes to town, and Lois becomes obsessed with meeting him. She shows up at his concert acting like a screaming teenage fan, which is cringe-worthy enough when you're watching a grown woman embarrass herself on live television while her family watches in horror. The situation reaches peak disturbing when Lois actually tracks down Bieber's dressing room and tries to seduce him. She bribes a security guard, gets into his private area, and starts making advances on someone who is clearly a minor. The power dynamic here is incredibly disturbing, an adult woman using her age and experience to manipulate a teenage celebrity. When she tells this underage kid to take his pants off, that's when this crosses the line from inappropriate into potentially criminal behavior. This isn't just a midlife crisis. This is predatory behavior that would absolutely result in criminal charges if this happened in real life. The fact that Peter shows up just in time to stop anything from happening doesn't excuse what Lois was attempting to do. What makes this even more infuriating is how the episode handles the aftermath. Peter and Lois have a heart-to-heart conversation where they both admit to having insecurities, and suddenly everything is forgiven. There's no acknowledgement that Lois literally tried to commit a felony or that her behavior was completely unacceptable under any circumstances. This pattern of behavior throughout all these episodes shows that Lois Griffin is fundamentally selfish, manipulative, and completely unable to take responsibility for her actions. Whether she's cheating with presidents, gambling away family property, abandoning her children, or attempting to seduce minors, she always finds a way to make herself the victim and avoid any real consequences. Peter Griffin might be an idiot, but he deserves better than a wife who consistently betrays their marriage vows, endangers their family, and commits potentially criminal acts whenever she feels a little bit unhappy with her life. Any of these incidents individually would be grounds for divorce, but all of them together paint a picture of someone who is completely unfit to be a wife and mother. The most frustrating part is that Family Guy treats all of this like it's just harmless comedy, when in reality, these behaviors would destroy any real family. Lois Griffin represents the worst possible partner. Someone who takes no responsibility, lies, manipulates, and puts her own selfish desires above the safety and well-being of her family. So there you have it, folks. 5 times when Peter Griffin should have absolutely divorced Lois and never looked back. From presidential affairs to attempted felonies, this woman has done things that would end any normal marriage immediately. Let me know in the comments which one of these shocked you the most, and whether you think there are any other Lois moments that deserve to be on this list. Don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Griffin family dysfunction, and subscribe for more Family Guy content. We've got tons more episodes to break down, and trust me, there's no shortage of material when it comes to this completely insane cartoon family. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey there, Night Owls and Family Guy fanatics. Before you drift off to dreamland, let me take you on a journey through the twisted world of Quahog and its unforgettable residents. Tonight we're diving deep into the most beloved and despised characters from Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece. So grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the wild personalities that have kept us laughing and cringing for over 2 decades. Picture this: a small Rhode Island town where a talking baby plots world domination. A paralyzed cop remains the voice of reason, and a dog walks upright while nursing his literary pretensions. This is the bizarre universe of Family Guy, where moral compasses spin wildly and character development takes unexpected turns. Some residents of Quahog have captured our hearts with their quirky charm, while others have become the targets of fan frustration and outright hatred. What makes a Family Guy character lovable versus loathsome? Is it their moral fiber, their comedic timing, or simply how much chaos they create? As we journey through this character analysis, you'll discover why certain personalities have endured as fan favorites, while others have fallen from grace, becoming symbols of everything wrong with the show's direction. Let's begin our exploration with Joe Swanson, a character who stands out like a beacon of decency in an ocean of dysfunction. In a show filled with morally questionable individuals, Joe represents something genuinely admirable. Despite being confined to a wheelchair, he never allows his disability to define his worth or limit his capabilities as a police officer. His determination and positive attitude shine through even in the darkest episodes. What makes Joe so endearing is his refusal to play the victim. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, he embraces his condition with humor and grace. The self-deprecating jokes about his wheelchair become running gags that work precisely because Joe himself doesn't view his disability as a weakness. He's shown time and again that physical limitations cannot diminish his strength, courage, or effectiveness as both an officer and a friend. Remember that powerful episode where Joe temporarily regained the use of his legs? The transformation was startling. Power corrupted him almost instantly, turning our beloved reasonable Joe into an insufferable, cocky version of himself. It took his friends literally breaking his legs again to restore the Joe we knew and loved. This storyline brilliantly demonstrated that Joe's wheelchair wasn't a limitation, but rather an integral part of what made him special. Joe's genuine kindness shines through in his interactions with others, particularly in how he handles Meg's crush on him. Rather than humiliating her or making the situation awkward, he lets her down gently, showing the consideration and maturity that separates him from his less evolved friends. His relationship with Bonnie may have its challenges, but Joe consistently approaches their problems with patience and understanding. The contrast becomes stark when we examine Chris Griffin, who represents the opposite end of the likability spectrum. Chris has undergone one of the most disappointing character transformations in the series. What began as an awkward but relatably sweet teenager has devolved into something far more disturbing. His evolution from lovable oddball to creepy, perverted dunce has left many fans wondering what happened to the Chris they once enjoyed. Early Chris possessed an innocent goofiness that made his mistakes forgivable. He was weird, sure, but in an endearing way that reminded viewers of their own awkward teenage years. However, as seasons progressed, the writers seemed to drain all charm from his character, replacing it with increasingly disturbing behavior patterns that mirror his father's worst traits without any of the redeeming humor. The breaking point for many fans came during this episode where Chris's response to bullying involved kidnapping Stewie and locking him in a backpack. This wasn't just stupid or misguided. It revealed a genuinely sociopathic streak that made him irredeemably unlikable. His willingness to exploit and harm others for personal gain became a recurring theme that alienated viewers who had once rooted for him. Chris's artistic talents offered glimpses of potential depth, but the writers consistently chose to ignore these opportunities in favor of cheap, gross-out humor. Instead of developing his creative side, they reduced him to a walking masturbation joke, with no growth, no development, and no apparent purpose beyond making audiences uncomfortable. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we find Adam West, the delightfully unhinged mayor of Quahog. West represents everything wonderful about Family Guy's absurdist humor. His complete disconnection from reality, combined with his earnest delivery of utterly ridiculous statements, creates comedy gold that never feels forced or artificial. What makes Mayor West so beloved is his authentic insanity. Unlike other characters whose crazy behavior feels calculated or mean-spirited, West's lunacy comes from a place of genuine confusion about how the world works. His attempts to gain superpowers by visiting toxic waste dumps or his confusion about basic concepts like public transportation create moments of pure comedic brilliance. The beauty of Adam West lies in his unpredictability. You never know what bizarre tangent his mind will take next, but you can be certain it will be hilarious. His complete lack of self-awareness, combined with his position of authority, creates endless opportunities for absurd situations that showcase the show's willingness to embrace complete nonsense in service of comedy. West's corruption stems not from malice or greed, but from his fundamental inability to understand basic concepts. This makes him simultaneously dangerous and endearing, a combination that few characters can pull off successfully. His random policy decisions and bizarre public appearances never fail to entertain, making him a consistent bright spot in the series. Bonnie Swanson presents a more complex case study in character likability. While Joe represents the best of humanity despite his physical challenges, Bonnie embodies frustration and resentment that many viewers find insufferable. Her constant complaints about her marriage feel particularly grating given her apparent unwillingness to actually address her supposed problems. Bonnie's role as the perpetual martyr becomes tiresome quickly. She acts as though caring for Joe is some unbearable burden, despite the fact that their relationship appears mutually beneficial. Her dependency on him contradicts her complaints about him, creating a character who seems more interested in generating sympathy than actually improving her situation. Her parenting, or lack thereof, presents another source of frustration. Bonnie shows minimal interest in her children, appearing detached and disengaged from their lives. This emotional distance, combined with her holier-than-thou attitude, creates a character who feels hypocritical and unlikable. Her affair with Brian further emphasizes her lack of respect for Joe, despite his obvious devotion to their family. The contrast between Bonnie and Joe highlights why Joe remains beloved, while Bonnie generates irritation. Joe faces genuine challenges with grace and humor, while Bonnie creates drama from relatively minor inconveniences. Her constant negativity and victim mentality make her one of the show's least sympathetic characters. Meg Griffin occupies a unique position in the Family Guy universe as the ultimate underdog. Her status as the family scapegoat has created an interesting dynamic where her suffering becomes a source of both comedy and sympathy. Many fans find themselves rooting for Meg precisely because she endures so much abuse from those around her. What makes Meg's character work is the exaggerated nature of her mistreatment. The abuse is so over-the-top and ridiculous that it loops back into comedy territory. Her family's treatment of her is so absurdly unfair that it becomes funny rather than genuinely disturbing. This delicate balance allows viewers to laugh at her situation while still feeling sympathy for her plight. Meg's occasional moments of strength and rebellion provide satisfying payoffs for viewers who have watched her suffer. When she finally stands up to her family or demonstrates hidden talents, these scenes feel earned and gratifying. Her brief stint in prison, where she became tough and confident, showed glimpses of what she could be if freed from her family's oppression. The character's potential remains largely untapped, which adds to her appeal. Meg possesses intelligence, artistic ability, and hidden depths that rarely get explored. This untapped potential makes her feel more human and relatable than many of her more cartoonish family members. Her moments of genuine emotion and vulnerability create connections with viewers who see themselves in her struggles. Doug represents everything wrong with Family Guy's approach to rivalry characters. Introduced as Stewie's nemesis, Doug never lived up to his intended role as a worthy adversary. Instead, he became a repetitive annoyance that frustrated both Stewie and the audience. His upper-class smugness and apparent invincibility made him feel like a cheap plot device rather than a genuine character. The fundamental problem with Doug was his lack of interesting qualities. He wasn't clever enough to match Stewie intellectually, funny enough to be entertaining, or threatening enough to feel dangerous. He was simply there, taking up screen time that could have been better used developing existing characters or introducing more compelling new ones. Stewie's inability to defeat Doug felt wrong for his character. The genius baby who builds time machines and death rays should not be consistently outsmarted by a slightly privileged toddler. This dynamic undermined Stewie's established competence and made their conflicts feel artificial and frustrating. The writer's decision to unceremoniously kill Doug off-screen felt like an admission of failure. Rather than providing closure to his storylines or giving him a memorable exit, they simply erased him from the show, leaving viewers with no payoff for the time they had invested in his conflicts with Stewie. Carter Pewterschmidt succeeds where Doug fails by embracing his role as an entertaining antagonist. As Lois's father and Peter's nemesis, Carter embodies every negative stereotype about wealthy elites while remaining genuinely funny. His complete disconnection from normal life, combined with his ruthless business practices, creates a character who is simultaneously despicable and hilarious. Carter's disdain for Peter provides some of the show's best ongoing comedy. His barely concealed contempt for his son-in-law, combined with his obvious belief that Lois deserves better, creates tension that translates into laughs. The fact that he's not entirely wrong about Peter's shortcomings adds depth to their antagonistic relationship. What makes Carter entertaining, rather than annoying, is his honesty about his awfulness. He never pretends to be a good person or tries to justify his selfish behavior. His brutal honesty about his motivations and his complete lack of self-awareness create comedy that feels authentic to his character. He knows exactly what he likes and uses his wealth to get it. Consequences be damned. Carter's capitalism, taken to absurd extremes, provides commentary on wealth inequality while remaining funny. His casual dismissal of poor people's problems and his genuine confusion about how normal people live create moments that are both satirical and comedic. He represents everything wrong with the ultra-wealthy, while being entertaining enough that viewers enjoy watching him. Herbert the Pervert represents one of Family Guy's most controversial characters. While some viewers find his antics mildly amusing, many fans consider him genuinely disturbing rather than funny. His entire character revolves around inappropriate behavior toward children, which crosses lines that many viewers find uncomfortable. The problem with Herbert lies in his one-note nature. Unlike other problematic characters who possess redeeming qualities or interesting depths, Herbert exists solely to make inappropriate jokes about children. This limited scope makes him feel more like a running gag that has overstayed its welcome rather than a fully developed character. Herbert's voice and mannerisms, while distinctive, quickly become grating rather than endearing. His appearances often feel forced, as though the writers are including him simply because he exists rather than because he serves any narrative purpose. This makes his scenes feel like interruptions rather than integral parts of episodes. The character's uncomfortable implications make many viewers question whether his inclusion is worth the potential laughs. While Family Guy has always pushed boundaries, Herbert's particular brand of humor feels more creepy than clever, leading many fans to wish he would simply disappear from the show entirely. Quagmire presents one of the most complex cases in Family Guy character analysis. His status as a perverted neighbor should make him completely unlikable, yet he maintains a dedicated fan base who appreciate his role in the show's dynamic. His relationships with women are deeply problematic, but his character possesses enough depth and humor to keep many viewers entertained. What saves Quagmire from complete condemnation is his occasional display of genuine care and loyalty. His protection of his sister Brenda and his willingness to stand up to her abusive boyfriend showed a side of him that transcended his usual selfish behavior. These moments of heroism provide glimpses of decency beneath his problematic exterior. Quagmire's rivalry with Brian offers some of the series' most memorable confrontations. His brutal takedown of Brian's hypocrisy during their dinner argument became an instant classic moment that many fans still quote. His ability to see through Brian's pretentious facade and call him out directly resonated with viewers who had grown tired of Brian's self-righteousness. The character's backstory adds layers that make him more than just a one-dimensional pervert. His complicated relationship with his father Ida and his genuine care for his cats reveal aspects of his personality that contradict his surface-level characterization. These contradictions make him feel more human and complex than many other characters. Brian Griffin represents perhaps the most dramatic fall from grace in Family Guy history. Once beloved as the voice of reason and moral center of the Griffin family, Brian has transformed into one of the show's most insufferable characters. His evolution from lovable family pet to pretentious hypocrite has alienated many longtime fans. Early Brian possessed integrity and intelligence that made him a compelling character. His refusal to cheat on exams and his genuine concern for his family's well-being established him as someone worth rooting for. However, as seasons progressed, his worst traits became more pronounced, while his positive qualities faded into memory. Brian's literary pretensions have become a source of endless frustration for viewers. His constant references to his unfinished novel and his pseudo-intellectual posturing feel tired and repetitive. His tendency to break up with women for being smarter than him reveals the shallow nature of his supposed intellectualism. The character's selfishness has reached levels that make him genuinely unlikable. His refusal to wear a flea collar despite infesting his entire family, his exploitation of Stewie's kindness, and his terrible treatment of his son Dylan paint a picture of someone who cares only about himself. His death and subsequent resurrection felt like missed opportunities to either give him meaningful character growth or replace him permanently. Brian's romantic relationships showcase his hypocrisy most clearly. He complains about only dating unintelligent women while actively seeking out such relationships. His inability to maintain connections with educated, accomplished women reveals his own insecurities and shallow nature. His treatment of women ranges from dismissive to actively harmful. Stewie Griffin stands as Family Guy's greatest character success story. His evolution from one-dimensional evil baby to complex, witty, and emotionally engaging character represents the best of what the show can achieve when it focuses on character development. His journey from would-be world conqueror to beloved family member has been genuinely compelling to watch. What makes Stewie so endearing is his combination of childish wonder and adult sophistication. His advanced vocabulary and complex schemes contrast beautifully with his genuine need for love and acceptance. This duality creates comedy that feels both intelligent and heartfelt, a rare combination in the Family Guy universe. Stewie's relationship with Brian, despite Brian's recent character deterioration, has provided some of the series' most memorable and touching moments. Their adventures together showcase both characters at their best, with Stewie's loyalty and Brian's companionship creating genuine emotional connections. Stewie's efforts to save Brian's life demonstrated the depth of their bond. The character's growth from villain to anti-hero to beloved family member has felt natural and earned. His evil schemes have become more playful than threatening, while his capacity for kindness and loyalty has expanded. His interactions with Rupert reveal his childlike side, while his inventions showcase his genius-level intellect. Stewie's humor has evolved to become more sophisticated and character-driven, rather than relying solely on shock value. His sarcastic observations and witty comebacks feel authentic to his personality while providing consistent laughs. His ability to break the fourth wall and comment on the show itself adds meta humor that longtime fans appreciate. Lois Griffin presents a fascinating case study in character likability, or rather, the lack thereof. While she appears to be the moral center of the Griffin family, closer examination reveals her to be just as flawed and problematic as the relatives she criticizes. Her hypocrisy and manipulative behavior have made her increasingly unpopular with fans over time. Lois's biggest problem is her tendency to present herself as morally superior while engaging in behavior that contradicts her stated values. She criticizes others for infidelity while having multiple affairs. Herself, she plays the concerned mother while neglecting her children's actual needs. This disconnect between her self-image and her actions creates a character who feels dishonest and frustrating. Her treatment of Meg represents some of her worst behavior. While Peter's abuse of Meg is overt and cartoonish, Lois's neglect and emotional manipulation feel more realistic and therefore more disturbing. Her tendency to gaslight Meg and play the victim when confronted about her parenting failures reveals a calculating side to her personality. Lois's violent tendencies, particularly after learning martial arts, showcase her capacity for genuine cruelty. Her attacks on innocent people and her aggressive behavior toward service workers reveal someone with serious anger management issues. The fact that she blames Peter for her violent outbursts demonstrates her unwillingness to take responsibility for her own actions. Her relationship with Peter, while central to the show, often feels more like mutual exploitation than genuine love. Both characters use each other for their own purposes, with Lois frequently manipulating Peter's stupidity to get her way. This dynamic makes their marriage feel hollow and transactional, rather than romantic or meaningful. Dr. Hartman provides comic relief through his spectacular medical incompetence. His complete cluelessness about basic medical procedures creates absurd situations that highlight the show's willingness to embrace complete nonsense for comedic effect. His survival in his profession defies all logic, which makes him perfect for Family Guy's reality. What makes Dr. Hartman endearing despite his obvious malpractice is his earnest delivery of completely wrong information. He never seems aware of his incompetence, approaching each medical crisis with unwarranted confidence. This combination of ignorance and enthusiasm creates comedy that feels lighthearted rather than mean-spirited. His interactions with patients and their families provide opportunities for misunderstandings that showcase the show's love of absurdist humor. His tendency to deliver completely irrelevant information with the same seriousness as actual medical advice creates confusion that translates into laughs. Dr. Hartman's continued employment at Quahog Hospital raises questions about the town's medical oversight, but viewers have learned to embrace such logical inconsistencies as part of Family Guy's charm. His presence provides reliable comedy without requiring complex character development or emotional investment. Peter Griffin occupies the uncomfortable position of being both the show's protagonist and arguably its most hateable character. His journey from lovable oaf to genuinely problematic individual has paralleled many fans' growing frustration with the series' direction. His behavior has become increasingly cruel and selfish, making him difficult to root for or even tolerate. Peter's treatment of his family represents his worst qualities. His abuse of Meg goes far beyond typical sibling rivalry or parental discipline, crossing into territory that feels genuinely disturbing. His physical violence toward his children and wife, while played for laughs, creates uncomfortable viewing for many fans. His friendship with Joe, Cleveland, and Quagmire often brings out his most selfish instincts. His encouragement of Joe's infidelity and his general disregard for his friend's well-being shows someone who views relationships as sources of entertainment rather than genuine connections. His inability to support others during difficult times reveals his fundamental self-centeredness. Peter's lack of growth or learning represents one of the show's biggest weaknesses. Despite facing consequences for his actions, he never develops genuine understanding or changes his behavior patterns. This static character development makes him feel less like a person and more like a collection of negative traits, designed to drive plot points. His role as father figure is particularly problematic, as his children are forced to navigate their development despite, rather than because, of his influence. His failure to provide guidance, support, or even basic safety for his family makes him one of television's worst fictional parents. The evolution of these characters reflects Family Guy's own journey as a series. Early seasons balanced outrageous humor with genuine character moments that made viewers care about these flawed individuals. As time progressed, the show's emphasis shifted toward shock value and repetitive gags at the expense of character development. Some characters, like Stewie and Joe, have maintained their appeal through consistent characterization and occasional growth. Others, like Brian and Chris, have suffered from writers who seemed more interested in exploiting their worst traits than exploring their potential for development. Still, others, like Peter and Lois, have become any-eaty, increasingly unlikable as their negative qualities have been amplified without corresponding positive growth. The most beloved Family Guy characters tend to possess self-awareness about their flaws or demonstrate genuine care for others despite their problems. Joe's kindness, Stewie's loyalty, and even Carter's honesty about his selfishness make them more palatable than characters who lack these redeeming qualities. Conversely, the most hated characters often combine terrible behavior with hypocrisy or complete lack of self-reflection. Brian's pretentiousness, Lois's manipulation, and Peter's cruelty become harder to tolerate when the characters themselves seem unaware of or indifferent to their impact on others. The show's treatment of these characters also influences fan perception. Characters who face consequences for their actions or show occasional vulnerability tend to maintain viewer sympathy longer than those who seem invulnerable to the effects of their behavior. The parenter, writers' willingness to explore character depths versus relying on surface-level gags, often determines whether characters remain fresh or become stale. Family Guy's character dynamics work best when they balance outrageous behavior with moments of genuine humanity. The show's finest episodes often feature characters stepping outside their established roles to reveal hidden depths or unexpected kindness. These moments remind viewers why they became invested in these characters originally. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider how these complex personalities have evolved over more than 20 years of television. Some have grown into beloved icons of animated comedy, while others have become cautionary tales about the importance of character development and consistency. The residents of Quahog continue to entertain, frustrate, and surprise audiences with their unpredictable antics. Whether you love them or hate them, These characters have become integral parts of popular culture, inspiring countless discussions, debates, and analyses, like this one. Sweet dreams, and may your subconscious sort through the chaos of Family Guy's character landscape as peacefully as possible. Tomorrow brings new episodes, new controversies, and new opportunities to debate the merits and flaws of Seth MacFarlane's animated creation.